All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're exploring a narrative so chilling and honestly so profound that it completely rewrites how we view our eternal struggle against the forces of nature. To really grasp the weight of this historical cautionary folktale, I want you to step into character with me for a bit. Picture this. I am a lighthouse keeper, stationed in a desolate realm where the horizon violently meets the void. For years, I've stood totally isolated at the very edge of the world, staring out into the unending blackness of the ocean, believing entirely in the absolute righteousness of my mission.
But here's the thing. The ocean has a memory. The sea does not forget what it has claimed. Let that sink in for a second. We build these massive structures of stone and iron, we conquer the land, and we think, hey, we can project our will over the water too. But this is the dark narrative hook of our tale today, the tragic futility of human control against the ocean's immeasurable depths. The sea is an ancient, incredibly patient force, and our attempts to master it, well, they're often just fleeting sparks in the dark.
So let's start with part one, the shield and the void, and the sheer hubris of control. As the keeper, I used to see everything in a strictly binary way. I genuinely believed my roaring lighthouse lamp was a literal shield. In my mind, on one side, you have the safety of the tower. It's warm, it's illuminated, orderly, deeply human. And on the other side, the danger of the deep, cold, chaotic, formless, and deadly. I'd look down at the jagged, merciless rocks at the base of my tower and see them as actual enemies. My light was a divine mandate to preserve life, a weapon I was wielding against the uncaring void. I spent years obsessively polishing the glass of that lantern, utterly convinced that pristine, blinding clarity was the ultimate enemy of death. I figured if I could just make the light bright enough, I could defeat the darkness entirely. But there's a horrifying flaw in that logic. A light strong enough to guide the living is bright enough to be seen by the shadows. In my obsessive, desperate need to protect ships from the rocks, I was blasting this massive beacon out into the void. I never once stopped to think that a radiance intense enough to cut through a midnight gale would also catch the attention of those who had already passed into the shadow. Without realizing it, I was broadcasting a signal straight into the abyss. Which brings us to part two, the Grey Weaver's summons and my direct encounter with the abyss. I'll never forget the evening everything changed, back during that terrifying incident in 1898. The air grew impossibly cold, the wind practically died down to this suffocating whisper, and the ocean spray actually parted. Standing up on the gallery deck, I looked down and saw this terrifying figure emerging right out of the churning surf. In the lore, she's known as the Grey Weaver, a banshee. For a whole week, this consciousness of the abyss kept my lighthouse under siege. She isn't just some monster of myth, you know. Her voice is a literal chorus of 1,000 drowned echoes. She didn't come to warn me of a future tragedy. No, she was there to claim the history of the sea. She was the living memory of the abyss, rising up to answer my light. And the scariest part? She didn't come alone. Out of the surf came the drowned souls of the ocean, drawn directly to the base of my tower like moths to a flame. It was this chilling, methodical process. First, they saw the radiance of my lamp piercing through their watery graves. Second, they hungered for it, craving the warmth and the life that it represented. And third, they climbed the stairs. They began this agonizing ascent at my tower during that long, dark week. And listen, they weren't coming to be saved from drowning. It was way too late for that. They were climbing simply to be acknowledged. As they climbed, this absolutely paralyzing realization just washed over me. The drowned don't flee the radiance. The beam I was projecting wasn't pushing the darkness away at all. It was acting as a bridge. The light was a summons. I thought I had built this locked door against death, but in reality, I had thrown a bridge right across the veil. I had sent out an open invitation to wandering spirits. My so-called protective beam was pulling them directly to me. So we hit part three, a chilling inversion and the grand epiphany. This was my moment of epiphany, the total collapse of my entire worldview. We really have to analyze the absolute irony of human intent here. We build these massive technological marvels, we assign ourselves these sacred duties, all in a desperate bid to control the chaotic forces of nature. But the abyss, it has its own rules. I fully believed I wielded a tool of salvation. The eerie reality was that it was an anchor for the lost. I thought it was a shield and a barrier. Reality proved it was a bridge across the veil. I intended it as a path away from the rocks, but it actually functioned as a summons for the dead. Literally every single protective measure I took achieved the exact opposite of what I intended. The conclusion here is honestly chilling. Sanctuaries turned into stages for the spectral. Our most desperate, well-intentioned efforts to ward off the dark, to carve out just a little piece of safety in a hostile world, they so often end up illuminating the exact horrors we're trying to avoid. By shining a spotlight into the darkness, we don't banish the monsters. We literally just give them a stage to perform on. Moving into part 4, the clerk's candle and my flight from the tower. The internal breakdown I went through was swift, and it was brutal. It was rooted in this forced identity shift. Imagine the crushing, absolute loss of your professional and personal purpose. Everything I had dedicated my entire life to was a terrifying lie. From a clinical perspective, my mind was shattering. I was no longer the proud guardian of life. The abyss had forced me to become an unwilling herald of the dead. I wasn't saving anyone. I was simply calling the dead up from the water, acting as a grim beacon for spirits who had already been claimed by the waves. I couldn't stay. I had to abandon my post, turn my back on the light, and flee the tower as the drowned crowded the gallery outside. Because I had to face my true role in the ocean's grand, uncaring scheme. I finally confessed to myself that the sea is simply a greedy, bottomless collector of souls. And my great, shining, magnificent light? It was absolutely nothing more than an inventory clerk's candle. I wasn't fighting the sea at all. I was working for it. I was just holding up a little candle in the dark so the ocean could tally its drowned. And that leads us to our final act, part 5, the silence of the deep, and the lesson of the parable. Now, if we step back for a second from my own personal trauma as the keeper, we find the profound wisdom of the 1898 Rathlin Island parable. This isn't just a ghost story meant to give you a quick scare. It's a deep commentary on humanity's relationship with the natural world. It carries a pretty grim lesson about our place in the universe. First, it teaches us that the boundary between the living and the dead isn't some solid, impenetrable wall of stone. It's as fluid and shifting as the tides themselves. Second, no matter how high we build our towers, they cannot truly defy the chaos of the depths. And finally, every single beacon we light, every signal we send out into the dark, inevitably calls out to all wanderers, whether they're seen or unseen. Which brings us to this incredibly poetic, if inescapable, truth from the source text. The light which guides the sailor home eventually guides the soul back to the silence of the deep. It's beautiful, but man, it's melancholy. The very same forces and tools that we rely on for life and for safety are inextricably linked to the end of that life. The light serves both masters equally, guiding the living safely to shore and guiding the lost back to the abyss. So I want to leave you with this haunting thought, speaking to you one last time as the keeper who fled his post. We all build our own lighthouses, don't we? We all construct walls and shine lights to keep the chaotic dark at bay. But if our beacons call the wandering dead, what horrors do your own sanctuaries illuminate? Look really closely at the safety you've built around yourself. What shadows are standing just at the edge of your light, waiting to be acknowledged? Think about that for a while, and I'll see you in the next explainer.